We often underestimate the weight of a single message. In the fast pace of modern relationships, where texts are sent, seen, and forgotten in seconds, it's easy to assume that what we send doesn't matter much. But here's where we get it wrong. A well thought out message, crafted with intent, has the power to echo in someone's mind for hours, sometimes even days. And when it comes to romantic connection, especially with a woman who values emotional depth, the smallest message can become the loudest memory. This isn't about manipulation, it's about mindfulness. The human mind is deeply responsive to emotional cues, especially those that come unexpectedly. Think about it. Most people's phones are full of routine notifications, work emails, group chats, reminders. But when she opens her phone and sees something that doesn't ask for her attention, but gives her attention, that moment becomes different. You've disrupted the noise with presence that sticks. Psychologists call this the emotional contrast effect. In simple terms, it means we notice and remember the things that break the pattern, particularly when they touch us emotionally. Let's go deeper. The female brain, neurologically speaking, is wired for connection. Studies in interpersonal neurobiology show that women tend to process emotions using both hemispheres of the brain, meaning they are more attuned to tone, nuance, and subtext. So when you send a message that's thoughtful, not just hey or wide, but something that shows you see her, you're speaking directly to the part of her that craves emotional safety. And whether she realizes it or not, she will feel a subtle shift. That message becomes a signal. I am not just thinking of you, I am thinking about you. There's a difference. This is why lazy communication never creates lasting intimacy. If your words don't carry intention, they'll dissolve into the background noise of her day. But when your words carry weight, when they feel anchored in truth, sincerity, and presence, they leave a trace. And that trace becomes a thought. That thought becomes an emotion. That emotion, it lingers, and she'll carry it with her through the rest of her day, possibly rereading it, maybe even smiling at her phone in a room full of people. That's not just cute, it's neurochemical. You're influencing her dopamine and oxytocin pathways, the very chemicals responsible for reward, bonding, and desire. This isn't just about being poetic or articulate. You don't need to write sonnets. You need to be clear, you need to be intentional, and most importantly, you need to be present. Ask yourself before you send that message, am I offering her something that adds value to her day, or am I just asking for attention? Because the truth is, attention given with depth is 10 times more attractive than attention requested without meaning. And here's the real key: consistency without predictability. The reason a powerful message works isn't just because it's unexpected. It's because it feels authentic. You're not trying to impress her, you're trying to reach her. And when she feels that, even subconsciously, it creates a loop in her mind. She doesn't just think that was sweet, she thinks there's something different about him. And that, right there, is where desire starts to deepen. So the next time you're tempted to send a quick, empty message, stop and remember this. She's not just scrolling, she's sensing. She's interpreting. And if you get this right, if you tap into what matters, you won't have to wonder if she's thinking about you. You'll know she is. Because a man who communicates with intention doesn't just get her attention, he earns her reflection. So let's talk about what you're actually sending, because intention without execution is just a good idea never brought to life. If you really want to stay on her mind all day, it's not enough to simply hit send. The content of your message The structure, the emotional tone, the unspoken subtext is what determines whether it lands or gets lost. Now, here's the truth most people miss. Women don't remember generic words. They remember how those words made them feel. That means the kind of message that stays with her isn't the one with the perfect grammar or the flashiest emojis. It's the message that meets her exactly where she is emotionally, without her needing to explain herself. In other words, it resonates. It feels like it was written for her. What makes that possible? Three things: personalization, emotional specificity, and timing. Let's unpack that. Personalization is simple but powerful. It could be a reference to something she said in passing, a callback to an inside joke, or a line that reflects how well you've been paying attention. That's important because attention is affection in action. When a woman realizes that you're not just hearing her, but truly listening and remembering, it signals emotional maturity, and that's rare. That's attractive. Then there's emotional specificity. The difference between saying, "I miss you," and "I keep hearing your laugh in my head, and it's making this whole day feel warmer than it should." One is common, the other is visceral. Why does that matter? Because memory is tied to emotional intensity. The more vivid and specific your language, the more likely it is to create an imprint on her mind. And that imprint becomes something she revisits, even subconsciously. You're not just sending a message, you're planting a thought. Now, timing, this is a subtle art. A message that arrives at the right moment can feel almost cinematic. Let's say she's having a hectic day. She hasn't heard from you yet, and suddenly her phone lights up with a message that doesn't demand her energy, but offers her calm. Something simple like, "I don't know what today is throwing at you, but I hope you're remembering how powerful you are." That lands differently, not because of the words alone, but because it shows attunement. You're not reacting. You're anticipating. That's psychological intimacy. And when that happens, she feels not only understood, but held. And let me be clear here. None of this works if it's performative. A woman can sense the difference between words that are trying to get a reaction and words that are anchored in sincerity. She might not be able to articulate it, but she'll feel it. And when a message feels safe, when it feels like it came from a grounded place, it bypasses her defenses. It doesn't just get read, it gets felt. And that's the whole point. You see, in a world that's saturated with digital noise, attention has become a currency. But emotional relevance, that's what makes a message unforgettable. It's not about being clever. It's about being clear. It's not about saying something new. It's about saying something true. And truth, especially when it's delivered with tenderness, lingers. So when you ask, what should I send her? The real question is, what do I want her to feel when she reads this? If you can answer that with honesty and precision, you won't need to second guess your message because you'll know you're not just writing to her. You're reaching her. And the message that reaches her heart is the one she'll carry in her mind. Let's take it a level deeper. It's one thing to send a message with thought and precision. It's another to send a message that speaks her emotional language. And I don't mean just saying "I love you" or "I miss you" in a more poetic way. I mean actually understanding the emotional blueprint that shapes how she receives, processes, and internalizes what you say. Because the truth is, if you're not speaking her language, you're just making noise, even if it's well-intentioned. We all have different emotional dialects. Some people crave words of affirmation, others respond to acts of service, shared experiences, humor, or even silence at the right time. For a woman to truly feel emotionally connected, she needs to feel understood without having to over-explain. And that requires more than charm. It requires awareness. This is where emotional intelligence enters the conversation. Emotional intelligence is not just the ability to identify your own feelings. It's the ability to accurately perceive the emotional cues of the person in front of you, and then respond in a way that respects, supports, and resonates with their state of being. That's not about being perfect, it's about being present. You can always tell when someone is emotionally fluent with you because their words don't feel scripted, they feel tuned in. And when you're dealing with a woman who values emotional presence, she doesn't just hear what you say, she feels why you're saying it. She's picking up tone, tempo, timing, and subtext. She's not just reading the message, she's reading you. This is why certain messages make her stop and reread. It's not just the words, it's the attunement. You said something that mirrored how she was feeling or needed to feel, or maybe didn't even know she needed to hear. That's not coincidence. That's the result of a man who's paying attention, not just to her actions, but to her essence. Now, here's where it gets deeper. Women, especially emotionally intuitive ones, are naturally relational. That means they're often thinking in context. How does this message reflect who we are, where we're going? What does this say about his emotional availability? Whether she's consciously asking these questions or not, the answers are shaping her perception of you in real time. So when you speak her emotional language, when your message taps into meaning, you're not just expressing affection. You're building trust. You're showing her that you are safe enough to understand her and strong enough to hold space for her. That matters deeply. Because when a woman feels emotionally safe with you, she opens up, not just romantically, but existentially. She's not just connecting with your words, she's allowing herself to be seen through them. And that is a sacred exchange. But let me make something clear. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's not about learning her code like a puzzle to crack. It's about becoming more fluent in yourself so you can relate with clarity, not confusion. The more connected you are to your own emotions, the more precisely you can speak to hers, because you're not guessing anymore. You're sensing. You're listening between the lines, and that kind of presence, it's magnetic. When you speak her emotional language, you do more than send a message. You create a moment. A moment that lives not just in her phone, but in her body, her memory, her emotional archive. And that's what makes you unforgettable. Because the man who makes her feel deeply understood, even in silence, is the man she'll never have to ask twice to remember. Let's bring this full circle. Because now you know how powerful a message can be, how to make it unforgettable, and how to speak her emotional language. But the question that really matters is, what happens after the message? That's where most people fall off. They believe the message alone is enough. But the truth is, a beautiful message with no follow-through is like a promise written on water. It feels good in the moment, but it disappears the second it's tested. If you want her to think about you all day, it's not just about what you say. It's about what you do next. A message that lingers in her mind becomes a seed. But a seed needs consistency, warmth, and care if it's going to grow. That's where presence turns into impact. See, what really sets a man apart isn't just his words, it's how those words align with his actions. That alignment builds emotional credibility. It tells her, I'm not here for the high of your attention. I'm here for the truth of your experience. And when your message isn't just a spark, but the start of a pattern, she starts to believe you're not just passing through her life, you're showing up for it. This is where consistency without predictability becomes powerful. You don't have to flood her phone every hour or say the same thing every day. In fact, that kind of repetition can feel mechanical, even performative. What matters more is that your gestures feel natural, sincere, and anchored in genuine interest. That might look like checking in on how her meeting went, sending a voice note when you know text won't carry the tone, or referencing a small detail she mentioned last week without making a big deal about it. These aren't grand declarations. They're grounded demonstrations. And the psychology behind it is simple. Humans, especially in emotionally intimate contexts, crave reliability. Not in the sense of routine, but in the sense of emotional safety. When your words and actions create that safety. When she doesn't have to wonder whether your message was a one-time performance. Her guard begins to lower. And where there's safety, there's space for emotional depth. But here's where it gets philosophical. Every interaction you have with someone leaves a kind of residue. It's either nourishing or depleting. It either brings clarity or confusion. When your messages become a habit of presence, when they're backed by curiosity, kindness, and consistency, they become more than words. They become a rhythm, a frequency she tunes into without even realizing it. And this rhythm, this invisible pattern of emotional engagement, begins to shape how she experiences you. It's no longer about one message that made her think of you for a moment. It becomes a relationship where your presence echoes long after you've said anything at all. That's the kind of presence that outlasts the phone screen. That's the kind of energy that stays with her when she's walking into work, laughing with friends, or lying awake at night.